Welcome to the Leadership Art Podcast. I'm your host, Art Robbins, and it's great to have you join us. The Leadership Art Podcast showcases everyday leadership in action. Each episode features insightful conversations with industry leaders who lead with purpose. Here you will discover practical insights, powerful lessons, and everyday inspiration to elevate your own impact, whether you are leading now or preparing to step up. We want to inspire you to be the best leader you can be. And today it's my honor to welcome our guest, David Brousell. Hi, David. Welcome.
Thank you, Art. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you. And just to introduce you to the audience, David is the founder and executive director of the Manufacturing Leadership Council, which is the digital manufacturing arm of the National Association of Manufacturing, the largest association of manufacturers in the U.S. The Manufacturing Leadership Council's mission is to enable its members to realize a better future by helping them transition to the digital model of manufacturing. They provide thought leadership content along with virtual meetings, conferences, and plant tours. And in his more than 40 years in journalism and high tech, David has covered numerous industry and business developments as well as technology shifts. And David, we've worked together for quite a few years, and I've always been impressed with how you built the Manufacturing Leadership Council, known as MLC, to be a beacon for setting a vision and direction for the future of one of the largest and most important industries in the world. And you've done it by getting the support, collaboration, and buy-in of leaders throughout the industry. And your connection with NAM has taken your impact to yet an even higher level. And as we all know, this is a leadership podcast, and it takes a different type of leadership to move an entire industry, especially as a third party outside of the actual companies. So I'd like to explore some of the key aspects of how you do that and share those lessons with the audience. But first, I think it would be good to maybe just catch up on manufacturing itself, because I know there's a lot of misconception out there about what manufacturing actually is these days. There are still people that think of manufacturing of labor-intensive processes and assembly lines, old factories and smokestacks. But yet, isn't manufacturing really one of the most high-tech, innovative industries in the world?
Well, Art, it is certainly becoming so, and that's what Manufacturing 4.0, which we are organized around, the fourth industrial revolution, we call it.
Okay.
That's what it's all about. And you can walk into many factories or plants today, and you would see glistening facility where not only people are working, but machines and computer systems and robotics are at work to produce whatever they're producing. More and more factories and plants are becoming software-driven businesses where everything is guided by information technology system, whether it's on the plant floor, operating at a robotics level to move materials around, gathering data to improve the efficiency of their operations, and do predictive maintenance, for example, on the machinery that's on the floor. More and more companies are doing this and moving to embrace this whole notion of manufacturing 4.0. We have done a lot of studies here at MLC about where our members stand on this. Think of it as a maturity curve. And on a scale of 1 to 10, most of our members at MLC cluster around the 4, 5, 6 area on that curve, which means they are well beyond the initial stages of adopting digital manufacturing, but they have a long way to go yet as they attempt to really reap the benefits of manufacturing 4.0. And the reason for this is because manufacturing is a complex industry. Most manufacturers have what we call technical debt, which means they have systems that are on the plant floor or factory floor that have been there for many, many years that have to be fitted with modern technology, what we call IoT or Internet of Things technology, which means placing sensors on the equipment, generating data from those sensors, and then being able to act on the analysis of that data within their organizations.
Right. These are expensive upgrades. This isn't coming up with the new release of the next social media app. I mean, this requires equipment and infrastructure and
It does. It requires investments in a whole assortment of technologies. But the good news about that is that the price points are coming down, and they have been coming down for some time. So now it's not tremendously expensive for manufacturers to invest in these technologies and to put them in operation. The hard part becomes really what we call the soft issues. The technology is not the big issue. The technology work, it's available. The harder part are these softer issues around changing cultures in the companies to embrace what we call a digital first mentality, getting used to relying on a data driven decision making process in the organization. A lot of companies have people who've been there for many years who rely on their experience and intuition about problem solving. They can be very good, but more and more we're trying to move to a data driven process where you can look at the data, trust the data, and say, this is the decision I need to make, or this is the decision I don't need to make. The cultural change is big. The organizational piece is also quite big. The more and more people become empowered with technology, with information down the chain, the more there's an opportunity to change where decisions are made on a process. And that's an adjustment for a lot of companies. It sometimes can challenge power structures. It gets political in these organizations, and that's a change that companies have to work through. The good news there is that most of our members, for example, come from engineering backgrounds, and they're kind of predisposed to data.
Mhm.
And once they start down that path and get comfortable with it and begin to trust what they're coming up with on the plant floor, the more we can smooth out those kinds of processes and decisions. So progress is being made. It is slow. I wish it was faster. One of our key missions at MLC is to accelerate digital transformation, give them the tools they need to move forward more rapidly with this change. For the larger companies, one of the big issues, we call this the scaling issue, is that a lot of the companies have multiple plants around the world. Not all these plants are the same. It's very hard to have one operating system model for all the plants. So plant A may do something very, very well in terms of moving toward M4.0, and they try to replicate it in plant B, but plant B is sufficiently different that it's tough to do this. So we're trying to give them the tools, the insights, and the knowledge to scale the change across broad footprints of plants and factories. That takes time.
Are you finding that given the maturity of the technology itself, it's not a question of whether or not the companies will adopt the technology? Are they recognizing, we're going to have to go to manufacturing 4.0 to be competitive or even to be a market leader? Is the question more about the speed and should they accelerate and how should they implement as opposed to whether they implement or not?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question anymore about whether this is an option. It is not an option. And it kind of takes me back to an analogy I often use with people. And it was just a week or so ago that there was the anniversary of the introduction of the IBM PC in 1981,
Oh my goodness.
the
I hate
5150.
to say it, I remember that.
Well, I was there at the introduction, at the press conference, covering that development. And, this was a very new thing for businesses to consider the idea of giving everybody a personal computer.
Mhm.
And, a lot of companies had used mini computers and mainframe computers, departmental computers, but the notion of giving everybody a personal computer was kind of a revolutionary idea. And companies at that time asked the question, well, why should I do this? Is this really necessary or is this just a fad? Infamously, the founder of the premier mini computer company, Digital Equipment Corporation,
Oh, DEC, the old
um,
DEC company. Yeah.
DEC.
Yeah.
Everybody knows if you've been in the industry any length of time, you know DEC.
I'm
didn't
showing my
believe.
age, David. What are you doing here?
Yeah. It's good because there are lessons to be learned, you know? And he famously said, or infamously said, depending on your point of view, that this was just a fad, these personal computers, just a fad. And people ask the question, well, what's my ROI on this? And there were no hard answers at the time.
Mhm, mhm,
But can you imagine any business today not having that for employees?
mhm.
It's incomprehensible.
Yeah, we both have grandchildren. My preschool grandchildren are using personal devices before they're even in kindergarten.
Yeah, and they're natives, they're gonna be much better at it at their age than we are at our age.
Exactly, exactly.
But, to me, it's incomprehensible, equally incomprehensible that a manufacturing company would not have digital tools to run their business. They
Yes.
have to have them. It's the price of doing business today. And, there's a lot of talk in the industry and outside the industry about the impact of these systems of digitization on productivity, and we're not seeing the productivity. My answer to that is you will. It takes time. It takes time to optimize the use of any information technology based system. You don't put it in and have an optimal use of that a week later or a year later. It doesn't work that way.
I mean, on a broad scale, you've seen huge ROIs for some of these developments, right? If you look at things like predictive maintenance or safety functions or quality functions, over time, the introduction of this has resulted in huge ROIs.
Yes, I think so. And then whether they're adequately measured is a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation,
I mean, it's
you know?
interesting that you characterize the bigger problems as being soft problems, which really gets to the whole theme of the podcast is leadership is how does leadership tackle that? How do they set a vision to get the organization together? I mean, you got so many forces here. You got people in the organization with different point of views. You got an industry that has more than its share of turbulence, and here you're trying to move the whole industry forward, and you're not even in the companies. So you're in a unique position as well as a challenging position of influence to both help set a direction and get conviction to move forward and set a pace to do it in a deliberate, effective manner. I mean, from a leadership standpoint, what are the key elements to do that successfully?
Yeah. It's a great topic and it's one that's really at the heart of MLC.
Mhm.
I guess ever since the founding, or not long after the founding of MLC, we have looked at the world through what we call a three-window lens. That manufacturing 4.0 consists of three major dimensions of change. The first is the technology. The second is the organizational change, the changes you need to make in your company, how it's structured, how information flows, how you make decisions. And the third is leadership. But we've always believed that the leadership component is the linchpin to the other two. And without enlightened leadership, you cannot really fully embrace manufacturing 4.0 and realize its benefits. And that leadership requires not only the basic business skills that any leader needs. You got to know what your customers want. You got to know how to innovate. You've got to know how to make a profit, right? I mean, all the basics. But on top of those basics, digital leadership requires layering a set of other competencies that we think are absolutely mandatory to succeed with manufacturing 4.0. The first is what I mentioned previously, being able to adopt a digital first mindset. And what this means is you don't have to be a CIO or come from the CIO ranks or a chief technology officer or someone who's steeped in the technology, but you do need to know enough about the potential of the technology to move your business forward. And that requires getting involved
Get your
with
hands
it.
dirty.
Yeah. The
Mhm.
second thing that you need in terms of leadership competencies is to understand the effect all these technologies are having on your organizational structure, We have been charting for many years the shift from command and control structures through to decentralized structures onto the promised land where everybody wants to go, what we call collaborative structures, where people are empowered increasingly with information to make decisions. They can do so because they have the data, the information, and they're trusted to make those decisions. And how to manage people in that collaborative environment where the leader is not a general, they are more on the side of being a coach. Some people talk about servant leadership because you have to lead in a collaborative organization very differently than you would in a command and control organization where you just give an order and expect it to be carried out, you know? So now our latest surveys indicate there's probably only about 9 to 10% of the companies still in the command and control structure.
Okay.
Most have moved to a decentralized structure, but they want to move to that collaborative structure more fully.
And are you finding there's a high correlation? You talked about that maturity curve where a lot of companies are in the middle. Are you finding that the companies that have successfully evolved their leadership model to more effective collaboration, they're the ones that are higher up on the maturity curve?
No question about it. And of course, it's very, very influenced by the size and complexity of the organization. If you're a 50 or $100 billion manufacturing company, you got a lot of layers,
Yeah.
you know, and sometimes they're very good at it though. And they have the money to invest in change management. The change management piece is enormous that has to be worked in these companies. The smaller companies have the advantage of not having so many layers.
Mhm.
So they can move a little faster if they've got the enlightened leadership to do so.
Yeah. Resources.
It does take resources, but I think more it takes a commitment to a vision of the future and a determination to get there.
Yeah. What do you feel you have done and you need to do more of in your MLC role to effectuate that result?
Yeah, and we're working on this now. We're going to be introducing some leadership development courses
Mhm.
for the membership probably early next year, where we can start training people about these digital competencies that they need in leadership. These can be learned.
Mhm.
You're not born with them.
Mhm. Right.
These can be learned systematically to be applied to whatever business you're running, whatever type of manufacturing you're involved with. So I'm a big fan of that kind of training. I think it can help accelerate the transformations. And as long as the companies are willing to invest in them, I think they have an opportunity to really reap some benefits from them. From MLC's point of view, we continue to emphasize what I call these softer things. And at our conferences, at our online webinars, we continue to push these notions of competencies that manufacturing leaders need to be successful with this manufacturing 4.0 revolution. One of the other competencies I think that leaders also need to layer on the basic business competencies is really establishing that vision of a future, a digital future, and then being able to work toward it and having the risk profile necessary to go forward. You have to be willing to undertake some risk.
Well, and what's interesting about that is, when companies are risk averse, they're always looking for examples of, well, where did this work before? Who's tried this approach and it's been successful, which requires that sharing and collaboration where companies are willing to share their experiences, share what works. And I'm curious, I mean, how do you achieve that in an industry that's so competitive and people are, concerned about their IP and their trade secrets? How do you both preserve that confidentiality, but still encourage an environment of sharing and collaboration?
Yeah, because there's a big push in the manufacturing industry to move toward what we call data sharing and data interoperability.
Hmm.
Particularly in your supply chain, you want to be able to move data around and share data to effectively manage partners and suppliers and things of that nature. So there's always a balancing act there, but you have to be very clear about what is something that has great value and should be considered proprietary, what may be at a moment in time of high value and proprietary, but has a relatively short shelf life, and then what is more negotiable. It's a real balancing act, but we strongly believe that these data sharing or data interoperability communities are something that the manufacturing industry should look at very seriously. So, for example, in the automotive space, there's an organization called Catena X, CATENA-X. And this is designed to move toward the goal within the automotive industry of data sharing and interoperability. And the theory being that if the industry can do this successfully, it can lift all boats rather than everybody trying to do the same thing individually or recreating the wheel within that segment of the industry. So
Well, it gets back to that leadership point, is that the leaders have to have the vision that that's going to be a win-win situation for everyone and cooperate.
yeah, and what you might perceive to be a competitive advantage may indeed be one. May not be as much as you think.
Yeah, or it may only be a competitive advantage today. It may not be one a year from now.
Well, that's the thing
Yeah.
because, if you looked at the list of the top Fortune 500 companies, the top 10 or top 20 list in, let's say, 2005 or 2010, and you looked at it today, how many of those from 2005 and 2010 would still be on the list?
Oh, yeah.
It would be a very different list.
It's shocking. Yeah.
And I
It is
think that,
shocking.
for leadership, you've got to be constantly attuned to what could be coming around the corner, what could disrupt your business. Things can change very, very quickly. Just look at the impact that ChatGPT has had in less than 3 years.
Mhm. So it's amazing how it's changed the workflows. And I actually want to spend some time talking about AI. We might actually need to have a whole other episode just to talk about AI itself. And
Everybody wants to talk about AI.
I know, or maybe we should have ChatGPT have the conversation for us. But I mean, what is maybe the one or two key takeaways in the time limits of this episode you tell our audience that they should be aware of for AI and how it might affect or how it's going to affect the manufacturing industry?
Yeah, it's already, and it has for a long time.
I mean, it existed before we got to,
Oh, for sure.
AI's been around for decades.
We called it business intelligence or data, analytic. We use general terms like that, but manufacturers have been using AI tools for various things for a long, long time. I do believe that ChatGPT and generative AI tools have been a genuine inflection point in the adoption curve of AI in general. And I've done a lot of research and I've given a lot of talks about what I call the worldwide competition for AI supremacy. A huge amount of money is being poured into this market, not only by companies, but by national governments. And a tremendous amount of innovation occurring. And I think the combination of these two things means it's going to move probably faster and slower than we think at the same time. And the reason I say that is if you just take ChatGPT as an example, it's bubbling up from the bottom in every company.
Mhm.
People are using it. And from the top of the companies are now putting in place policies and governance structures to try to control it.
Right. Well, it's
Good
sort of
luck with
like the advent of the PC. Everyone has it on their desk.
yeah, good luck with that. But it shows you how fast things are moving. And we're already seeing some studies out that companies are not getting the ROI they expected with these tools. And to some extent,
There's a big one by MIT just
yes, I've
that
seen it.
had some staggering numbers.
Yeah. This is not to be unexpected in a sense. The hype around this thing has put it on the radar screens and the front page of every newspaper in the country almost every day. So naturally, there is going to be some disillusionment that seeps into this. And the adoption and effective use of AI, just like a lot of other technologies that have come before, will not be a straight line going upward. It will move 3 steps forward and then it'll take a step back.
Mhm.
It's happened with every technology. that's come down the pike.
Right.
I don't think this one's going to be any
It's
different,
just
frankly.
history repeating itself.
It is, and I don't
Yeah.
think it's going to be any different. But I do think that the pressure is going to be on because, as I said, it's bubbling up from the bottom. But boards of directors of companies and CEOs are asking their operational people and other people in their organization, their functional heads, what's our strategy? What are we going to do with this? Is this really going to change everything? The way we work, how people work, how we're structured, who does what? And they want answers.
Yeah. Well, I think there's such a lack of precedent right now about what works that every company is left to its own device to make those decisions. The only way they can make them is they have to pilot and experiment and figure out
That's
what's the
right.
balance between, human and machine. And there's no clear answer right now. And there may not be a rubber stamp answer for every company is going to have a different answer and they'll reach it at a different pace.
I think there'll be some commonalities that emerge over time. I think very much how this is looked at and how this is reacted to will depend upon the leadership. What's the attitude of the leadership in the company? And you will get some that may resist. You will get some that will say, we have to do this and we have to figure it out. And you'll get others who will say, we're going for broke and we're going to base the whole business around this because we think it's that consequential and we want to be one of the leaders. We're already seeing the emergence in a number of companies, just like we did in the 80s with the CIO function of the chief AI officer function.
Hmm.
It's already happening. They want to get organized around it. They want to have someone responsible in a senior leadership position to direct the efforts. And because I think a lot of boards and CEOs are saying, we don't want to get left behind. And if this thing is as big as it's predicted to be, we want to be one of the leading companies. I
Might
think
be similar to the conversation we were having about manufacturing 4.0. The question isn't going to be whether we do it or not. You have to do it. The question is how are you going to do it and what pace are you going to do it?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're at that point with it because, it's been around now. I was writing about AI systems in the 1980s,
Yeah,
1990s.
I
I mean, it's
know.
been around a long time.
But now it's been more personalized. It's been more powerful. So here we are. So, David, we're running out of time here, but there's so much more we could be talking about. And I think you've given the audience a lot to think about. And I'm sure they want to hear more and stay in touch as your additional research comes out, your thought leadership. How can people keep up with you and stay in touch with you?
Well, there's a variety of ways. The MLC website, manufacturingleadership.com, at the NAM, can always go up there and look at what we're doing. There's a lot of material that's viewable and readable by anybody. You can do that. I'm on LinkedIn. You can message me on LinkedIn or just drop me an email at dbrousell@nam.org. I'd be happy to talk to anybody who's as passionate about change in the manufacturing industry as I am.
That's great. And I can vouch that you're very approachable. And I would highly encourage the audience to stay in touch with Dave because they're doing great stuff and they're very well connected to some of the top companies in the manufacturing industry. And if you have any interest in it, it's worthwhile staying in touch.
And in December, we will be having our next Future of Manufacturing project. And we will be having our conference the first week in December in Orlando. You can check that out on the website. And it's open to anybody in the industry to attend if you'd like.
So
To
that's
pay a
great to
fee.
know.
You have to pay a fee, of course, but uh,
Perfect.
it's
Well, David, thank you again for being our guest today. I
well,
really
thank you for
appreciate it.
having me.
No,
Yeah,
it
thank you
was
for
a
having me.
pleasure. I think we learned a lot. You gave us a lot to think about. And again, I also want to thank our listeners and our followers for joining us and for your continued support. So until the next episode of the Leadership Art Podcast, this is your host, Art Robbins. And remember, it's your lead.